Well, I'm turning the mic on, guys.
I mean, I've got to have this thing Thursday nights.
Good evening. Welcome to our monthly agenda setting meeting. To both of you attending here in the chambers with us and those watching remotely. At the end of this, well, nix that because we're not going to have a meeting at the end of this one because we don't have a quorum. But anyone who would like to have an agenda to follow along with us, the agendas are on the table in the hall just to the right of the doors as you exit. And if you're watching us remotely, you can get an agenda from www.accgov.com. And that's a new site, www.accgov.com. No final action will be taken on agenda items tonight. Items discussed will move to our business meeting on Tuesday, February 6th for consideration and vote. If you have a cell phone with you tonight, please turn it off or to silent. And if you brought handouts, if you give them to Mr. Berryman, he'll make sure that we get them. Our rules of commission allow 3 minutes for comments from citizens. There's a light on Ms. Spratlin's desk. It will start out green. It will be yellow when you have 30 seconds left. So please try to have your remarks finished so that I won't need to interrupt you. There are 2 opportunities for public input tonight. Our consent agenda, which are items 1 through 6, our new business, which is 7 through 20, and we don't take public comment on the recommendations from the Planning Commission at our agenda setting meetings. We will have a public hearing on that before our business meeting on March the 6th. So we'll now begin our agenda setting with the consent agenda items 1 through 6. Anyone who would like to comment on one of those items, please come to the podium, give us your name and address, and let us know which item you want to speak to. Okay, seeing none, we'll come behind the, I've said the bar before, come behind the rail. The bar, the rail.
Come behind the bar, I like the way that sounds.
Well, we were doing alcohol license one night, I said come behind the bar, so I've tried to watch it since then. Would any of the commissioners like to remove anything from the consent agenda?
I just have comment on number 2 and number 3, and then they
Sure.
can go right back on there.
Yeah,
You want me to
yeah.
go?
Yeah, we'll just go ahead and tell us what's.
Okay. I was wondering on number 2, since it was added for the corridor study to go to the county line, can we have the maps included for the next round to follow that?
Yes, thank you. I did talk to Professor Crowley about that. It's to take a little time to generate it, but we want to make sure that was pointed out. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you, yeah. Okay. And you said.
And number 3, on the signature pages, this has to do with our resource officers, which is, it's a shame that we have to have them, but their presence brings safety to our community and the campuses.
Very much appreciated.
And on the signature page, could you make sure that's updated to Jared Bybee is the Clarke County School Board President? I'm sure that paper was generated in 2017, but that would be the updated page. That's all I wanted to share.
Okay, any other commissioner wish to remove anything from consent? Okay, we will now go to our new business, which are items 7 through 20. If anyone would like to speak to one of those, please come to the podium. And again, remember our 3-minute rule. Give us your name and address. Anyone wish to speak to one of those? Okay, we'll come behind the rail. Melissa?
Yeah, I just want to say a few words about the sidewalk gaps, just so the public knows what we're looking at.
And this is item number 7.
Yeah, item number 7. We are looking at some sidewalk on Chase Street between Boulevard and Nakuchi Avenue to complete sidewalk on the other side of the street, which is going to really come in handy. There's a lot of traffic, foot traffic on that street and on that neighborhood, and people are crossing Chase Street. And as we know very well, the speeds on Chase Street are really dangerous, the auto speeds. We're also looking at completing that little block of sidewalk at Baxter Street and Milledge, and that is also a much-needed piece of sidewalk. I've actually found myself walking up Baxter Street on that side of the road and trying to dash across to find the sidewalk. It's a difficult project. The topography is difficult, but it's definitely much needed. And then we had a third piece of sidewalk.
Southview.
Yeah, on Southview Drive. So yeah, we can see that our sidewalk gap program is moving along, and I know folks look forward to those chunks
And
of
then there'll
sidewalk.
no longer be the sidewalks nowhere. So, anyone else wish to comment on
I
this?
do. I'm very excited about Southview is pretty long, and that will allow a person to go from Milledge sidewalk all the way out to Kroger on the east side and have sidewalks. You have to change sides of the road
In order to have
periodically, but it's sidewalk all the way. That's a large gap that's being filled there. I did have a concern about, there's a section of the sidewalk between Scott and Ag Drive that narrows to be 3 feet instead of 5 feet. It talks about a utility pole being there, but that utility pole is in between 2 driveways, and I was hoping that that could be looked at a little bit closer to make sure it is 5 feet. The traffic that goes down Southview is really fast, and I understand the topography makes it to where we can't always have that, that safe zone between the curb and the sidewalk. So some of the 5-foot sidewalk does go to the curb, but to change it to have a 3-foot and also be right at the curb. There's a resident right in that area that is wheelchair bound, and so that would be immediately problematic for that person for that stretch to be there. So maybe it can come wide or inside the, but you guys, if you guys would take another look at that and see if that could be updated. But this is very excited. The people who have the sidewalk on their side on Southview, and I'm a property owner on that side, are happy about it being there, and the people that don't have it on their side are happy that we're not putting it on their side. So
That's
it's
interesting.
great from the feedback I'm getting in my district.
Well, so everybody's happy. That's great.
It appears so.
Yeah, good. Anybody else wish to comment on number 7? Okay, move on to number 8. You know,
I'd like to say
Mr.
something, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Ma'am.
I'm sure that the staff is already thinking about this, the manager's office and transportation and public works, but with the pavement maintenance program, we've got several studies coming together with pedestrian and bicycle alternative transportation. And of course, we're going to be able to start drawing some money from SPLOST pretty soon. So just want to encourage our staff to try and make the most efficient use of any of these paving projects, to try and work things together, which I'm sure you do already, but I just want to voice it, that just try and find synergies and better ways to manage and get the most paving for our buck, the most best paving for our buck. Thank you.
And the fastest way possible.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Mayor? Oh,
Yes, sir.
sorry.
Yes.
I had something, but I think commissioners wanted to say something.
Yeah, this is a long list of streets for new paving. Are we going to get to all of these this year, or is this just the priority list that we get to until the money runs out? I know with TSPLOST money, we've got more money. So are these a done deal for this year, or?
My understanding they are, as long as we have money. If we, for whatever reason, the funds run short or we don't get to all the streets, they will automatically carry on to the next year.
Okay. So I have a question about Nacoochee Avenue and the speed bumps on Nacoochee. What is the process for repaving when you have a street that has those speed tables?
And I'll have to double check on this, but they'll pave right up to the edge of the speed tables,
Okay.
and the speed tables stay in place.
Okay. And as far as other streets that might qualify for speed tables, would it be prudent to maybe look into that before the repaving? 'Cause I know there's a couple streets on here where folks have inquired about possibly getting some traffic calming.
Well, we
What would
do-
you recommend?
We have the neighborhood traffic management program,
Yeah.
which governs that process. So if folks, and you remember this because you've been
Yeah.
involved with that, the speed thresholds and the,
I mean, this might give folks the prodding they need to actually ask staff to offer that up. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, if they were to go through that, it would probably be prudent for them to get that analysis done before any repaving, so that.
yes.
Okay.
But certainly, obviously, speed tables have been installed after the fact as well, so it's not your only opportunity
Yeah.
to do that.
It might be an easier opportunity, though, while they're repaving.
We can, I can find out more about the mechanics of how that works and share that with the
Okay,
commission.
yeah, that would be helpful.
Mr. Harrod.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually have a question, not specifically about the pavement maintenance program, but about the attachment number 3 from the Athens Cultural Affairs Commission, which appears attached to several different documents. So they've indicated projects seeking 1% public art inclusion and projects not for inclusion. And there were a couple. I didn't have any issues with most of them, but I was wondering if maybe, Mr. Manager, you could shed some insight on. There were a couple here where they're recommending not including public art. One is TSPLOST item number 1 out at the airport, but the other, which is maybe more pertinent to what we're discussing here, is the proposed roundabout at Whitehall and South Milledge. I know lots of communities use the centers of roundabouts for some kind of public art. Is that roundabout simply not big enough for a piece of public art, or is there some other discussion going on that we're not cognizant of, or maybe they just decided they just didn't want it there?
And I can give you some more detailed information. Here's my brief understanding. Consistent with the conversations we've been having in the Lexington Road Corridor group, putting a hard fixed object in the middle, of a median or a roundabout. And I know what you're talking about, Commissioner. Over in Europe, you can see these old statues there. Was, I think, initially something we wanted to avoid. And then on the periphery, 3, there's Pepinos, and then the other 3 corners, if you will, are all UGA owned. And so we don't really have a lot of public right-of-way there. So those are, I think, 2 of the things that went into their decision to not recommend that. Now, I will say, we have talked about having, a granite wall feature, sort of a welcome feature to Athens-Clarke County, that you're in that sense of place. So that is still part of the project at this point.
Okay, I certainly having, I've seen these in other parts of the world, but thought I'd seen some in Georgia as well. Not that we have a great plethora of roundabouts in Georgia, but I thought I'd seen some here with some public art in the center. But if there's any, I know that GDOT has its issues with that kind of stuff, but if there is a way to include something along those lines in the center, I think it really adds to our efforts as a community to increase the availability of public art in the community. So,
Point taken, and we'll do a cast about the state to see if there are some examples out there. Share that with the group.
Thank you, Mr. Harrod. Mr. Neesmith.
I should know this, Lane, I'm sorry. In this table of streets, what does PPI stand for?
PPI.
pavement something.
8.
This is, what page is that on?
It's on, it's on the chart of
It's what the column-
pavement
column headings.
maintenance projects. It's a column heading. Street from to PPI, lane miles, center miles.
It stands for Pavement Priority Index.
Okay.
Pavement priority. So the higher the number, the more priority it is?
Yes, that is correct.
Does this
It's
list,
kind of sort of a calculation to indicate the pavement condition.
right, so
Yes.
as the cutoff at, what is it? I see 2s and, I see all the way down to 24, 25,
Well,
27,
with-
30.
With the preventative maintenance, that's just something we do as a matter of course.
Right.
But with the rehabilitation, generally, it's around 22 or so. 22, 23, 24
It
is
starts
the
at
cutoff.
49.
But the higher it is, the more critical it is.
So let's say, since this starts at 40, that would be a high priority. A lower priority would be, down this list would be 22. This seems to be the lowest priority. Are all the streets with priorities between those 2 numbers on this list? Or were some that had a 23, 24, or a 40 not put on this list? How did you determine what priorities to put on, what streets to put on this list?
It is, it's a number of things, but the PPI is one of the factors that governs
It's
it.
one of the factors. So
Yes,
what-
sir.
I mean, I know streets that are in horrible condition that aren't on this list, and it concerns me. In fact, I can't find them on any list.
And which ones are those, sir?
Well, there's Deer Run, for example. There's a couple more that I can't recall right offhand.
This does not include all of the roads that fall in that range, but if you'll remember the TSPLOST deficit list, by
Yeah.
the end of the TSPLOST, all of those deficit roads will be taken care of. That's the plan. And if you'll remember, we had this conversation, the deficit list was produced last year as part of the TSPLOST to give people a sense of what we're talking about. But it changes from year to year because the conditions change. And so in any given year, a few roads may fall on, a few roads may fall off. I should also mention too that if we are in a neighborhood and there are two roads that are clearly within this range, and there's one that's just off, since they're there, they'll go ahead and take care of that road while they're there as
Well,
well.
I know I've heard that, but I also saw it not happen. Deer Run is an example.
Okay.
Deerfield was paved. Deer Run is a short little road, maybe 2 houses on it. And it wasn't paved, and I couldn't find it on any list anywhere. But that's just a sort of an outlier, I know, but
We'll follow
it
up
needs
on
to be
that.
paved. Okay.
Ms. Wright? Well, yep.
Well,
I'll get back to Melissa. She'd already spoken.
Is it accurate to say, too, that we haven't finished with this year's
That's right.
paving? Because if I recall,
They stopped.
one of the streets in my district that's pretty bad is Newton, near Parkway Homes. And I remember seeing it on the list going, oh, great, that's going to get paved this year, but it hasn't happened yet because we haven't finished the current list. So maybe we need the current list to compare. I mean, there's a gap again in what's going to still get finished this year
Yeah, we're-
versus this, because this list does not entail what hasn't been finished yet, because
That was
this is
already-
for
that was
like
already
July
approved,
1.
yeah.
we
right?
will restart in March with the,
In March?
yeah, once we're
Okay.
past freezing, that type of thing.
I see. So,
But I will say this, we're gonna change from a fiscal year to a calendar year. You know, we follow fiscal year because of funding, but in all actuality, paving activities occur between March and October. So this is a transition from fiscal year to calendar year, and you'll note that in the agenda item.
okay.
Ms. Link?
Yeah, I have some questions. Some of these streets that, possibly could get some bike facilities or, different parking schemes or what, I'm thinking of Washington Street downtown. There's been talk of reconfiguring that street. You really don't need 3 lanes of traffic blasting through the middle of downtown Athens. I'm looking at the other end of Newton Bridge Road. That could possibly get some bike facilities. We got a lot of people living out there on Vincent Drive that need to get into town. What would you recommend for the process to have those roads considered for those kind of bike facilities or, reconfigurations?
Well, I think we'll look to the bike ped master plan to help guide us on some of those facilities. I will say that Barnett Shoals is on the list, and that we'll look at that from a road diet perspective. That was called out in the agenda item as well, so.
So will that bike ped master plan committee take a look at this list and make some recommendations?
I don't think that's part of their scope. I think that they, and I think you're, on the 27th, you're going to hear, next Tuesday, you're going to hear a presentation on that, and you can see where they've kind of mapped out where they would like to see, bike lanes and connectivity, things of that nature.
What about Washington Street? What are the plans for considering that? I mean, we're reconfiguring Clayton Street. Are we going to take the same approach to Washington Street?
We haven't had that discussion yet, but that would be the time to do it, when we're going to repave.
So would you recommend any way to make sure that discussion happens? Or should we recommend to pull this off the list and have that discussion over the next year and put this back on next year?
Well, the condition of Washington's in pretty bad shape. So I would, let us try to come up with a process to have that discussion,
Okay.
and, rather than pulling it off at this point.
Okay.
Okay, guys. I think that one probably needs to stay on regular agenda, Gene.
Mayor, and I just want to add one other thing. You know, Commissioner Bailey mentioned coordination, and I just wanted to recognize Transportation and Public Works and Public Utilities. They've gone through the list, and they're trying to reconcile each other's projects, so there's not new pavement that's saw cut to put in pipe. And they've delayed some projects, some roads, to make sure that they can, to the best that they can. And I think it shows the new leadership and the willingness of the departments to work together, and I want to point that out.
And I expect all of our citizens will appreciate not seeing new pavement cut up, so that's great. Anybody else want to comment on this one before we move on to number 10? Okay. No, actually, it's number 9, the Road to Zero grant. Would anyone like to discuss that?
You know, while we were going through this, can we put 7 on the consent agenda? I forgot that I was supposed to.
Yeah, I told her to put it on
Okay,
consent.
all
I'm
right.
sorry.
So you got that covered?
Yeah.
What? Okay, thanks.
Okay. I'll talk about the Road to Zero grant.
Sure.
It's a pretty exciting. And I want to thank staff for making this grant application. They're asking for a grant for $197,000 to fund a traffic safety initiative in the West Broad neighborhood. We have about $4 million from TSPLOST set aside specifically for transportation improvements in those West Broad neighborhoods. So this can perform the kind of due diligence, the kind of proper study and community input process that we need to make sure that that money is best spent. I have a question about how GDOT figures into this, considering that we have a state highway running right through those neighborhoods. Is West Broad itself and those major intersections, which are, you know, the primary problem, are those, does that figure into this? Like, how are we gonna pull GDOT into this conversation to talk about possible changes that might impact West Broad itself?
Well, they actually were the ones that brought it to our attention. that this
Okay,
grant
so they're
existed,
willing to work with us and,
Well, so that is part of the study area.
okay,
And so it will be looked at, and what we're aiming towards is developing a traffic safety plan that takes into account, you know, the residents' pedestrian routes and that type of thing. If there's a major project identified that requires their participation, I mean, we don't have their tacit approval blank check for that, but I'm sure they'd be open to any safety measures that would make sense. in
yeah.
there.
Well, I mean, I would think that speed would be the #1 safety issue, and that would mean some engineering changes to that stretch of highway, which is about 7 or 8 lanes in some parts.
And for the benefit of those of you that are here with us tonight and watching on TV, the Road to Zero is working towards 0 fatalities on our roads. And it might sound like pie in the sky, but there's some of us that think it's potentially possible,
Yeah.
particularly with self-driving vehicles coming
Well-
on the horizon, so,
I've lost 2 personal friends on that stretch of West Broad.
yeah. Anyone else wish to discuss this one? Mr. Harrod?
I think this is great. I guess the only thing I would say is I kind of wish we were doing this across the entire county.
Yep.
Well, and I
This
will
is-
say, Commissioner Harrod, that, that y'all, the mayor and commission had prompted staff to do road safety audits and identify some of our, you know, look at all our pedestrian crashes across the county. If you remember, we came up with 32 road segments, and y'all authorized additional funds for us to introduce additional pedestrian safety measures. You know, I would say in the last several years, there's been more activity along those lines, thanks to your direction, than there has been in years past.
I think it's on everybody's radar right now. Are y'all okay for this to go on consent?
Yes.
Okay. Item number 10 is our capital improvement program for the airport, matching funds and TSPLOST Project 18 funds, and it's the proposed project concept. Anyone wish to discuss that?
Well, Blaine knows how I feel about this. we keep putting money into the airport, saying build it and they will come. But we're really not doing anything substantial, as far as I can tell, about attracting a commercial airline. I know we've made steps, but we haven't closed the deal. So I'm looking forward to hearing a report on progress and plans for attracting a commercial carrier. I know there's a lot going on. We're not informed about this except informally. And certainly we'll continue putting money in there, but we've got a nice terminal that's locked,
Yeah,
and that's a shame.
but we sure want our runways safe.
Oh, well, the runway is, yeah, that's got to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are y'all okay for that to go on consent?
I will say that is still a focus of the airport authority, and I met with the new chairman just last week. You know, going forward, what the airport authority would greatly like to do is create a strategic plan for the next few years for the airport, so that the authorities on board, that they can communicate and articulate to you the direction that they think the airport ought to go into, get your agreement on that, and then continue to work for an air carrier. You know, we've got the grant that was applied for back in December. We're waiting to hear on that. We do have some funds that you approved last year for some marketing efforts. And in talking with the new airport authority chair, he seems to understand how critical it is that we be successful on the next, you know, if we do attract a carrier. Because if we get a startup that just doesn't work very well, then it might be harder to convince folks that it is viable here.
Y'all ready to move on? Okay. Is that one okay for consent, y'all? Okay, consent agenda. Okay, our next item is number 11, which is our Cedar Creek Solar Array Project, which I'm very excited about. Would somebody like to talk about that? Mr. Bailey?
Well, I don't have anything real specific to say about it, except that I'm glad to see that we're moving forward. It was one of the areas that we vocalized that we would like to see more of in the county, and I really think that staff, and specifically public utilities, since this is on their property, has done a good job to get a major project going out there, and I'm very excited. And I want to thank staff for working so diligently on this.
Ms. Link?
Yeah, I'll add to that. I'm very excited about this project. I do have a couple questions. Is this cost estimate for it accurate, considering that we're about to see a big increase in the cost of solar panels thanks to a tariff, a federal tariff? Is that figure into this project at all?
I can't say, I could go back and check with the folks that evaluated the bids, whether that jacked the prices up, but this was done with how much solar capacity could we get for the lowest price and the quickest payback. That's how it was pitched.
Yeah, I know this has been in the works for a while.
I believe, I heard staff say that they felt like this was a pretty good deal for us.
Okay. Also, there is talk of looking into kind of a biogasification or solids disposal project. Was that intended for this facility, or would this solar array bump up against that possible potential project?
Well, thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner. Yes, we are looking at alternatives for biosolids processing. As you know, we've got an agreement that y'all approved for us, a temporary disposal solution for those, and we are looking at that. I don't think this would preempt a new technology. I believe the first plant that we might be looking at might be North Oconee. I don't know. But this would not interfere with our ability to introduce that technology. As you know, we have a great deal of property out there, and this is going on top of the old plant, which has structures below, so this is an appropriate use for the top.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Harrod?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also think this is a really good project, but I did have one question. So we're presented with 3 different options here, and on 2 of them, we get a return on investment timeline. And on option number 2, there is none because, I'm assuming because there's no capital cost to us. So it's just a little bit, we're kind of comparing apples and oranges a little bit between option 1 and option 3, where we can see what the return on investment is, versus option 2, where, if I understand what I'm reading here, there's no capital cost to us, so it's a little bit difficult to figure out a return on investment. And so I was wondering if you could maybe just talk a little bit more, especially for people that are watching at home, why option number 3 makes the best sense for us.
The READY program. So the two, we've got option 1, which is the build, own, operate, and offset. And then we have the
Third-party builds and owns.
yeah. Well, option 2, I'm sorry, hold on one second. The READY program, I guess the difference in them is that while there's no capital investment, the operating costs would likely increase.
Okay.
And working through Georgia Power, they had set up, there's an incentive to them because they want to produce so much power that is renewable.
Well, and they also don't want to have to build any more power plants.
And what we're hopeful for, even though we're on the wait list, and the mayor and I both have had conversations with Georgia Power officials, is that should somebody that did win that lottery decide that they didn't want to go through with it, then that would free up a spot that we most likely would capture. The payback in partnership with Georgia Power is about 6 years. It's 14 to 16 years payback versus the 22 years if we own it ourselves. And we don't get as much capacity with our build, own, operate as we would with the READY program.
So the biggest problem really is that they only have a limited number of spots, and we're not one of them. And they're
We
not
were
gonna-
told that it was purely
It was a pure
a
lottery.
lottery.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
not
we-
on the
and-
merits of the program.
Yeah, and we didn't, but we're high on the list. I guess they prioritized the lottery that they drew, and we're high on the list. So if another community found it was not feasible for some reason, or they couldn't complete theirs, we might rise up to the top. So,
Do we know
So-
where
so-
we are on the wait list?
no, not precisely.
Near the top is what we were told.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess my question is, if we were on the list, if I'm reading this, option number 2 would be the best option, is that correct?
If the READY program is the best option for us based on the amount of investment, the return on investment, and the energy operating offset.
But we're not on that list at the moment.
We're
We don't-
hopeful this will resolve in March,
Okay,
but we wanted just to go ahead and move forward. And I know we don't like to normally give you 2 options to vote on, but apparently this is not going to come around again for some time, so.
okay. So just last question. So if at the March voting meeting, we were to vote option number 3, and then a month or so later, find out that actually some other community can't be on the list and we kind of get their spot, we haven't done anything that limits our ability to take advantage of that.
No, sir. The way that it's worded is, that you would approve both approaches. If selected, we would be in the READY program. If not selected, then we do the BO3, the build, own, operate.
Okay.
And of course, this isn't going to happen in 2 weeks, so there'll be a little bit of float time in case somebody decides to pull out.
Okay. Is there a drop deadline for pulling out?
I'd have to find out.
But we haven't been given that information. But one of the things, I hope that my memory is correct on this, that this plant uses about twice as much power as all of our other facilities in Clarke County combined. Is that correct?
Well, the 3 plants together in our treatment plant,
Oh, it's all treatment plants.
Yeah.
But, and this is going to provide somewhere around 40% capacity for the plants.
that's right, of the these water reclamation facilities run 24/7,
Yeah.
and they use a lot of energy. And if we go with If we go with the READY program, it will offset about 40%.
And that's what's so exciting about this, because this is our biggest user of electricity, and a huge, huge part of that capacity, so this is great. Okay, I think we probably need to leave this on the regular agenda for now.
But I'll just say, it obviously reflects the community values that y'all espouse about being more environmentally friendly, but I think the folks out there need to understand that this also makes financial sense for us.
Well, hopefully it will hold down the cost of the services in the future. Not necessarily lower, but keep them from going up. Okay, item number 12 is our vendor selection contract award for the insurance broker for our property and liability lines of insurance. Anyone have a comment or question on that one? Are y'all okay for that to go on consent? Item number 13.
Can we put a contract like that on consent? I'm fine with it going on consent, but I just wonder is, we can?
Yes, there's not, the recommendation's already been made, the solicitations have already been submitted.
Okay, just want to make sure we're,
Thanks. Well, it's always good to check. Yeah. And number 13 is our Unified Government of Athens-Clarke County and University of Georgia Transportation Agreement for students, faculty, and staff. And this is our bus system agreement that we have with the University of Georgia. Yes, sir.
Can someone summarize the differences between this year and last year, this proposal and the current one?
Mr.
Are there significant changes?
No, there isn't significant changes. Really, the only thing that's driving the change in the numbers, quite frankly, is just that the overall ridership has gone down. So that kind of affects the calculations. And what I mean go down is just the 3-year average of what we have. I mean, the Uber and Lyft and some of the other rideshare services and so forth are, taking the impact of this. So that's really part of the reason that this has become recalculated that way. But in terms of the mechanics of how the agreement works, no, there's no substantial changes.
Could it be also that the UGA buses running on College Station and Prince Avenue have affected the ridership of students on our buses?
Yeah, I mean, that's been going on for a number of years, but yeah, that's calculated into these, but, yeah.
I think we felt that impact more at the time that service began, and it's sort of normalized, but it does contribute. So that is really the change between the two, is just the 3-year running average that's been recalculated.
Yeah, so that 3-year running average, this change to those new bus routes, at UGA would have been in within that 3 years.
I think, I mean, just, and I'm going to answer a future question by somebody, but I think there's going to be a number of changes in the next contract year. I mean, we talked about during our work session with the TDP that we're going to be pulling off of Sanford Drive and servicing University or East Campus and Lumpkin primarily. There's this building of a park and ride eventually off of College Station Road that the university is building. There's going to be a number of changes in the mechanics of this agreement. We're going to be, in fact, the agreement calls for us to do some additional surveying work during this calendar year once these route changes take place in order to better understand the ridership habits. So I think going forward, you're going to see some different calculations and a different type of agreement.
You have any idea what the budget impact is with this 3-year average going down?
Well, I mean, for this agreement in particular, I think it's a reduction of $75,000 that's coming to the unified government. So the University of Georgia is receiving a little greater share of this pot of money.
And do we have any idea what the next agreement impact is going to be in those numbers?
We don't at this point. That's what I was talking about in terms of we're going to have to do some additional surveying and ridership data and see how this changes. I think you'll see some big changes in next year's contract. It's just going to have to, just the mechanics of it will have to change.
Thank you.
Mr. Harrod.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So obviously, I think, this is a good way that we can partner with the University of Georgia, just so, again, people who are out in TV land understand what we're talking about. So we get a number of rides that the UGA students and staff take on our buses. We get a list of the number each year, and they can use their UGA ID cards to ride on our Athens Transit System buses, and then we get a payment from UGA. My question specifically is on page 106 of the PDF, where it says, right at the bottom, student, faculty, and staff trips will be determined using the number of magnetic strip reads derived by actual riders swiping University identification cards through Athens Transit System, GFI, electronic fare boxes. And then it talks a little bit about the details of how that will work. And then it says, cards determined by the university to be ineligible for this program shall not be accepted by Athens Transit for the duration of time that such card is on the quote-unquote bad card list. So my question is, if I have a UGA ID and I get on the bus and it's one of these quote-unquote bad cards and I swipe it through the fare box on our bus, will it still register as me being able to have a ride, or will I have to pay cash? In other words, will I be allowed to ride the bus even if I have one of these quote-unquote bad cards? Maybe I was a student and I'm no longer registered at UGA, or do we only find out several months later when we get the list?
Well, both. Well, we do get an updated monthly database list, so we would understand better as what's a bad card and what's not a bad card. But also immediately at the ride, we would get but the magnetic reader would reject the card,
Okay.
and they would require to pay the cash.
Okay, that's all I needed to know.
That makes sense, because you were raising more questions for me. Ms. Link?
Yeah, you mentioned that this contract amount is going down because we're likely seeing offset rides from Uber and Lyft. Is there any discussion at all about possibly taxing Uber and Lyft rides? I know that other communities are starting to do that and pulling in revenue to fund transportation, public transportation. Is it legal in the state of Georgia to do that?
Well, it's funny you bring that up, because there's been a flurry of legislation this year in the General Assembly, and I know at the staff level, we've been flying a whole bunch of emails around about that exact topic this week. I don't know if, Bill, do you have anything else to add? But certainly, I think if it's something that's allowed in the Georgia legislation, then it's something that we definitely want to pursue and study and look at and probably make some recommendations.
Butch McDuffie and I were talking about it before the meeting, and that is in one of the transit bills for the long-term regional transit appropriation they're looking at. One of those things is a fee or a tax on Uber and Lyft.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been it's been utilized in a number of other metro
Yeah.
areas across the country, and most of the times the states have to authorize the communities in order to have that type of tax, depending on the constitution of each state. So it's something that we're certainly interested in following.
I've seen some studies that indicate that those rideshare services are actually adding cars to the road. When it's easy to call up a car to your front door, you opt not to walk or take public transportation, and there's quite a congestion going on downtown late at night when they come and pick up.
We're reading the same studies.
Yeah.
Are y'all okay for this to be consent?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And the next is our review of historic preservation ordinance and associated policies, and that was GOC? Mm-hmm. And who's our chair? Our chair's not here. Oh, Andy is our
No,
chair.
chair is here.
Thank you.
The chair is here.
Andy's chair.
I do that to you every time, don't I, Andy?
You do. One day I'm not going to.
He's going to sit there
So
and be
this
quiet.
was assigned to the GOC to look at issues of historic preservation ordinance and associated policies and procedures. We had many meetings discussing this. So what our recommendation is, Bruce Lonnie and Brad and some other members from our planning department and other staff members had put together a memorandum entitled Proposed Revisions to Staff-Issued Certificates of Appropriateness, which recommends some changes to how we do historic preservation. And so the recommendation coming from the Government Operations Committee is that we recommend that those proposed revisions be brought before the mayor and commission by planning department staff. and that's it.
Okay, let me make sure I understand. They're going to be bringing items to us on certificates of appropriateness or,
On a
that-
number of revisions to how certificates of appropriateness
Oh,
are
it's just-
considered and issued.
so it's the revisions. But what we're doing, as I understand it, is allowing our planning department to make some decisions without having to go all the way to the
That is
Historic
correct.
Preservation Commission. Yeah, good. Okay, Ms. Link.
Yeah, the HPC passed these recommendations, it was probably about 2 years ago. I remember being in the meeting when they passed them. And I think that this will make it a lot more palatable for folks in historic districts to make modifications to their home. I mean, under these suggestions, you can put a shed of up to 250 square feet in your yard without having to go through that HPC process. You know, some minor demolitions of outer walls will be allowed without having to go through that. Some roof changes, like if you want to put a dormer in the back of your house, you won't have to go through the HPC process. Material changes, changing out windows if they're within the, you know, the historic materials. It's a whole long list, and I'm going to forward this to some of the neighborhood listservs in historic neighborhoods in my district so folks can get an idea, and it would probably be a good idea if some folks in 5 Points take a look at them too, so they know that this is coming. You know, people are pretty intimidated to go before a board when they want to do something to their home, and I think that this will help overcome some of that intimidation, and it might also help some other neighborhoods decide that they might want to get that historic designation protection if they know that, you know, these very regular minor changes don't have to go through the whole rigmarole of going before the Historic Preservation Commission. So I'm looking forward to seeing this move forward.
Ms. Link, I mean, Ms. Raleigh.
She's done.
She's done. But your
Since
turn.
this has been a lengthy time in committee, and I would like us to show our confidence in it by putting it on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Consent. Anybody object to that?
I certainly do not object.
Okay, good.
I
Okay,
say
well,
we send it back to committee.
LLC.
item number 15 is our Oconee County our Oconee Rivers Greenway Network Connectors, sub-projects and construction contract change order. That's usually your bailiwick, Mr. Neesmith. You got anything to say?
Yeah, I just want to know, sub-project 5A is shown on the graph, but I don't see it anywhere else in the text. Sub-project 5 is 5A included in this?
No, sir.
Okay.
And the Oconee Rivers Greenway Commission let us be known, since the UGA is building that park and ride, that maybe we not spend the funds on 5A and put that towards other trail.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I sure do. Is sub-project 6, that's Cars Creek, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
That's still on here and being funded, even though we're a long way from having rights, access to the property. Shouldn't we consider delaying that?
Well, that's up to y'all. There was a commission-defined option that approved that as a project, and then, as you know, subsequently, in the TSPLOST project language, the
Right.
previously approved.
Had to complete, but if we can't complete it, I don't know, I'd like to see a way out of this. I mean, I've been a big supporter of sub-project 6, as you know, but I just don't see it happening for a long time. I mean, we're not even willing to condemn the land for a greenway. So if we're in that situation, it seems foolish to tie that money up when we could use it for some other part of the greenway that needs it more.
Well, we can certainly share some perspectives on that, but since it was wrapped up in the TSPLOST referendum, it's a little more complicated than just simply reversing that decision.
I understand. Let's see if we can figure out a way to do it right without tying that money up for a project we can't complete, when we got projects we can complete, but they're not on here.
Ms. Terry?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So something that Commissioner Neesmith just mentioned kind of rattled some brain cells in my head. So when the loop, the intersection at the loop is reconstructed by GDOT, in the not too distant future. I seem to recall going to one of the GDOT presentations, and they were talking about, in order to make that happen, diverting some traffic through Cars Hill. Would that affect our building of the Greenway going through Cars Hill? Because if so, that was another reason to maybe postpone doing it for the time being. But I can't remember exactly where.
Don't confuse Cars Creek with Car Hill. Andy, I'm not sure you're doing that. But they're two
Okay, well,
different
I thought you
things.
said Cars Hill.
No, Car Creek,
Oh, okay,
yeah,
never mind.
okay.
Anybody else? Ms. Link?
So this portion of the Greenway is through a very dense part of town. I mean, am I on the wrong one?
I think so.
Okay, never mind. Sorry.
That one's coming up. That's the next one, I think. That's the one that's TSPLOST that was in the work session.
Okay, then I was on the wrong map.
Okay, Ms. Wright?
You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I would like to keep this packet moving forward so that we can get it resolved. If it needs to move forward for us to resolve the Cars Creek part. And so moving forward and not taking it out allows us to keep working on it to make it happen, in my opinion.
And just to be clear, that the Cars Creek is not part of this particular agenda item. And I did want to point out something that I think the citizens would be interested in knowing, and that is because Public Utilities agreed on the back end, so they hired a contractor to replace a sewer line on all the way from where the old wastewater plant was through this entire area that we're talking about. They agreed to house within their contract a subcontractor that would build a greenway immediately behind it. And it's ended up saving $200,000 because of the disturbance of the replacing the sewer line. The grading was done, the clearing was done, the soil erosion and control was kept into place. Those were all savings to the Greenway project. On this new change order that you're going to be considering, it's almost a mile of new Greenway trail, and because it's piggybacking on the back of the sewer project, it will save almost $75,000. So I want to applaud Public Utilities for, that's an unprecedented step for them to be in that, to bring that into their contract.
Would that be the purple and the blue lines on the map? Is that right? Or just the purple?
Yes. Purple and blue.
Sub-project 3 and then 4, segment 1?
Yes.
So for people who are interested in seeing this in progress, if you go to the light on College Station and turn down this North Oconee access road, and you can look on the, you can walk on the sidewalk and the bridge, and you can look down and you can see where the sewer pipe is diverting it and the progress that's happening. You can see it from both sides of that. It's very impressive. I've been watching them through different phases of it, and it is coming right along, and if it quits raining, it'll go a little faster. Is that correct, Blaine, that section? that
That's
you're talking
right.
about?
The blue line's under construction now, and then it's the first segment of the purple line, and then the magenta line, the solid magenta line are the ones that are going to be built out as part of this.
Gotcha. And that gets to the dead end of Bailey Street as well as the dead end of Carriage Lane.
That's exactly, and connects
Commissioner
that whole
Neesmith.
neighborhood to the
And
network.
that's a lot of
It's a big
residential area, and
Big
that's
connection.
my district, and it's a great variety of residential, multifamily over there. Thank you. And I would like to see this on the consent agenda.
Everybody okay with that? Are you okay with it, Mr. Neesmith?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
If I change my mind, I'll let you know.
Okay, you can always pull it off at the next meeting if you change your mind, so. Okay, item number 16 is again Oconee Rivers Greenway project.
This is one.
Yeah, this
And this is the proposed project concepts and sub-projects, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11.
Yeah. This is the segment of the Greenway on the other side of the river to make for a parallel, proper Greenway trail along the river. And this is, at the very edge of downtown through a really dense neighborhood, lots of dense residential areas. I just want to point out that we're already seeing some real estate speculation in this area, and it is crucial that we get some affordable housing policy laid down in this neighborhood as soon as possible. We knew this was coming. and to not move forward with some new policies to protect these neighborhoods, to hold some developers' feet to the fire in building, making sure that they include affordable development in these projects, you know, it would be irresponsible because we do have an affordable housing crisis in the community, and we are already seeing folks being displaced. We're going to see 4 homes demolished because of this Greenway and because of development that is heading to the Greenway. So I just want to put that out there, that we need to move soon, more than soon, like yesterday.
Anyone else wish to speak to this?
Is everybody good with the topic of number 16, that we could put that on consent?
Okay, Consent, Jean. Okay, 17 is Rails to Trails Network program, and this is land acquisition. Any questions, comments? Explanations that y'all want from staff? Mr. Harris?
Say something.
I don't really have any questions or comments. This is really to purchase a piece of land up behind the tailgate station. But I've actually, as happenstance would have it, I've having some correspondence with a constituent today, and there seems to still be an ongoing problem. I know we've talked about this before, but of people using the parking lot behind Mama's Boy to go and eat at the restaurant and not to use the trail, meaning that people that want to use the trail don't have anywhere to park. And I know that one option is to have somebody monitoring parking. I'm not sure that that's necessarily the best thing, but could we at least maybe reach out to Mama's Boy and maybe ask them if they could be perhaps a little bit more mindful of the neighborhood in which they are, so that other people that may want to use the parking for the purposes it was designed for get an opportunity to do so.
Go down there and talk to them.
Okay. If that's all y'all got, are you okay for that to be consent? Okay. Item number 18 is to authorize the $8 million loan for the TSPLOST 2018 program. We have this just by title only, but does anybody have any questions about the concept of doing it? Okay, we'll move on to item number 19 for, that's the 28 Stop Violence Against Women's Act. And this is to take care of some positions in the Solicitor General's office. Is it? I thought I had the number of positions there,
It's
but
title only right now, so
for the,
Number
Yeah,
19.
There's no agenda item.
oh, that's why I couldn't tell you.
that's why you
So,
don't have the.
that's why I couldn't tell you anything. So that needs to stay on regular agenda for now. And then number 20 then is our intergovernmental agreement for the sale of the reservoir property. And of course, this is title only, but any concerns, questions about this? Okay, we'll leave it on our regular for now. Get Brad to come up and, so we can look at our planning items.
Some follow-ups.
Ready when you are, Brad.
Okay, we have two for you this evening. First is a special use request at 1697 and 1699 South Lumpkin Street. Special use for a veterinary clinic. Existing use of the property is an animal diagnostic lab, which is not considered a vet clinic. I mean, they basically, you're able to bring your pet, they draw blood with you there with the animal, and the blood is sent off for testing at a reduced price from what you may get in other places. What the owner would like to do, because he's already essentially set up, there's not even a required change within the building, to be allowed to see animals too for veterinary purposes. No boarding proposed, no surgeries, any of that, but just a neighborhood vet clinic, which is a special use and requires the binding site plan and everything else that goes along with special uses, as you all know. So would not have kenneling. There are some non-conforming conditions on the property that we have tried to pick up through conditions of the approval through the Planning Commission, and I think it's pretty well spelled out if you look at the pink sheet from the deliberations of Planning Commission as to the discussion and where they ultimately landed. See here the property in red. I mean, this site plan's a little bit like what you see a lot of times with the individual personal care homes, in that your binding development plan for the special use is really just an as-built survey of what's already in place. They are not proposing any changes, but would be limited to this if they establish that veterinary use on the property. The frontage. And then the recommendation from the Planning Commission is to approve, but with the conditions you see listed there. Most of this is just bringing the property more into compliance with current development standards. Some additional planning along the rear of the property line. There's actually a residence, or maybe multiple residents behind this. It's part of the property. We need a handicap parking space, permanent edging for the existing gravel parking, which is largely the parking that accommodates the residential use of the property, but is on the lot in question. Street trees, pedestrian connection, and the 5-foot future right-of-way. And with the inclusion of those standards, the Planning Commission recommendation was to approve.
That's right, this is your district.
Brad, can you help me understand? I've got questions on 3 of them. Can you go back to the picture that shows the diagram of the property?
Yeah, so help me, the 3 areas I want to understand about are the street trees.
Okay?
So explain to me where that comes into play, because it's already a business. So how is this business change, or the scope of the business changing, kicking in the tree
The
street?
scope of the business in and of itself does not change it, which is
Okay.
why when the pet lab was put in, it has not been there very long.
Right,
Because there was no physical change on the property, it did not trigger those design standards. There is language in the special use chapter that talks about the establishment of a special use should also demonstrate that it meets the underlying zoning and development standards of the district it's located in. So, and that's why, because he was not making any changes, that's why we listed them as conditions. Because through the granting of the special use, we're asking that he bring the property into compliance.
okay, and then talk to me, and then help me understand, the back part is residential. The front part's commercial, and then the gravel parking pad is not part of the parking count for the business, but yet the business needs to get the gravel parking lot in compliance with an edge? Is that
Yes,
accurate?
that is what is being asked, because the current gravel parking is not in compliance in that it has a permanent edge, and gravel parking tends to grow over time if you don't edge it. And, you know, that was a discussion that was held at the Planning Commission level too, and there was actually
Yeah.
a substitute motion that removed that did not pass, and they went back to the original motion. But because that gravel parking exists on the property that is requesting a special use is why the condition's being requested.
And because, and it really is insignificant in the eyes of the discussion that you heard, that's a residence in the back, where this is the business's
Yes.
condition?
I mean, it's still, you know, we're not able to split the property into pieces and bring part of it into compliance and not the other part.
Okay,
And again, I mean, these are all things that ultimately you all, as the elected body, could not include those conditions. And
Right.
it could go forward without them. These were not things that needed variances because there were no changes being made to the property,
gotcha.
which is why they list here as conditions instead of variances.
Gotcha. And I've got one more, and I also welcome feedback from other commissioners who maybe have dealt with the same thing, or Commissioner Neesmith with you on the planning. So then the next condition that I'm curious about has to do with this very back property line, right? And then it has to have some screening buffer, so that's going to be vegetation planting to buffer this property from the property behind it, because why?
Because it is commercial property adjacent to single-family residential property, and that requires a buffer.
And it doesn't matter that the property owner is the same for both of those?
Does not matter.
Okay, and then they have specifications to know what those buffers,
Yes.
Details
It
being-
would basically be a row of evergreen hedges planted along the back.
okay. So I welcome any commissioner who has any feedback on those three in particular.
Of course, ownership of that other residence could change, so you want
That's
it
true.
to be compliant.
Yeah, so that's why it's irrelevant, I guess.
And I think it's, you know, it's kind of unfortunate that when you've got a piece of property that has dual uses and special use permits encourage, shall we say, the property to become compliant with current ordinances. Therefore, we're asking for this edging in the gravel. I don't think it's unreasonable. I mean, we're giving them something, for a special use permit, and we're not asking for much, I don't think. So I would support this as it's written.
Commissioner Neesmith said that the ownership of the back could change,
The-
but you
the-
can't subdivide it.
No, we're talking about where the hedges are.
Oh, there, oh,
Yeah,
you're talking about
yeah.
the neighbor's
Yeah,
property. I
right,
thought you meant
yes.
the
No.
house, the
No.
residence part versus the
No, I'm sorry, I wasn't
business
clear.
part,
Yeah,
okay.
because the back is, you said it's single family, it's when commercial is next to single family that the buffer,
That's what's
Concept.
driving the buffer, yes.
and it didn't happen before because possibly this has been commercial for so long that that wasn't one of our things back then. Is that
Correct.
how that goes? Thank you.
So once upon a time, this was a residential street and this was a residential property, correct? At
I assume,
some
yes.
point, yeah. And then that structure in the back is essentially an accessory dwelling unit. Are those pretty common? I'm looking at the map over here.
It's, there's
Seems
a,
like there are quite a few of them.
they're grandfathered in,
Yeah.
and there,
Yeah.
there are quite a bit in the Five Points
Yeah.
area with that.
Garage apartments, things like
Garage
that.
apartments.
Yeah, I just wanted to point that out, that it's interesting that we do have accessory dwelling units in our
It's
nice
prob-
upscale neighborhoods.
Probably was, and I'm not so sure the garage wasn't converted at some point in the past to a second unit. I think it's an over and under now, so.
But it's nice to see it, providing a little bit of modest, affordable housing in what's a pretty trendy neighborhood these days.
Okay, y'all ready to move on to the next one? Okay.
Okay. Next item, 980 and 994 South Lumpkin Street. This is one that you all have seen before. It is a request to change our future development map from community institutional to Main Street business and to rezone from commercial office to a commercial neighborhood plan development on 3 properties totaling just over an acre. Proposal is a 112-bedroom student dormitory, 4 floors arranged in pods with common kitchens. I won't go through all of these details. What I can tell you, because you were all here when it was presented the first time, is that the property has been largely redesigned. Different architecture, different look to it, different setback off of Lumpkin Street. When we were here last time, I think 2 of the real big issues that you all seem to have, as did we, all the access was directly in and out off Lumpkin Street. There was a pedestrian island in the middle of Lumpkin Street, which was affecting the stacking distance for the left turn movement if you're southbound on Lumpkin. And there was no access directly to University Court. And there was opposition from the university who owns University Court. They have gone back, redesigned. There is now 2 options. The option that's being recommended to you includes, there are still some waivers, fairly minor in terms of overall nature of the project. But let me get on up to, there you see the location. Here's where we'll go. 2 options that they're proposing, an option A and an option B. In this case, B is on the left, A is on the right. This was largely done at a time where the property owner was still largely unsure whether or not the agreement with the university would be made. And so they needed an optional design that went back to full access only to Lumpkin. The option A that you see on the right is a split deck with the lower level entering exclusively with a right-in, right-out only access point from Lumpkin Street for the residents, and then a second-level deck that enters directly off of University Court. There is no internal access between those two levels, and largely the upper-level deck would be used for the chapel, for the restaurant cafe, for those types of uses as well. And that is the option that is recommended to you by the Planning Commission, not the option B, which basically you see if you entered in, you would go to the right and up if you were going into the second level. Let me see it a little bit better here, I think, in terms of the way the grade change occurs here. So that would be the entrance going into the lower level off of Lumpkin Street, and then the second level up in this area would come in directly off University Court. See just a couple views of the property. There is an agreement with the university. It is not an easement, but it is an agreement for a 50-year period of time. There are several pages worth of conditions and stipulations that both parties, it's our understanding, has agreed upon. I do want to emphasize that the fact that there is an agreement is important to us to provide the access. The conditions of that agreement are not something that will become part of this rezoning if it's approved. There are things in there that are certainly fine for two individual property owners to agree on, but they do not need to be included as part of a rezoning that becomes conditions that we enforce. So, but that is in place, it's our understanding. So the recommendation is to approve this in accordance with the option A, which is the split deck, to provide us with the specific agreement that is signed with both UGA and property owner for use of University Court. And then there's just a couple of minor issues. The oaks were potentially too close to the building, that's been clarified. And then there was an issue of a temporary tower location that show up on the plan. There is a stealth tower on the property now in the back right corner that was put in probably in the mid-90s. That tower has to go away as part of this design, but the function of the tower will go into antennas on the roof of this project when it is completed. In the interim, there will be a temporary cell site in the back right-hand corner that will function to provide service until such time the antennas go on the roof. So that's why it showed up on the plan. We're fine with that as well. So having said all of that, the recommendation from the Planning Commission is to approve with those conditions.
Okay, Ms. Bell's not here. Is anybody else that has questions?
I have
Ms.
a
Ron?
Yeah, Brad, can you summarize what the staff's recommendation was?
What, the staff's recommendation? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it was largely similar to
Okay.
what came out of the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, we had some concerns with the tower because we didn't understand it really. We were strongly opposed to option B in terms of an alternative. We understood completely why they were asking for it, and we hope that we've gotten past that. Really, I mean, personally, we would love to see internal access where everybody could come and go, but understanding, I think the solution that has been proposed is good. The design on Lumpkin Street, there will be a concrete ribbon curb down the center that will prohibit the left turn movements unless you jump a curb to do it, but it's not designed in the same way it was where it impacts that stacking distance on southbound Lumpkin Street.
Ms. Terry?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Brad, could you go back to the plan of the option A and option B?
Mm-hmm.
So option A is the one on the right and option B is the one on the left, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So on option A, you're saying that if you're driving up Lumpkin Street and you turn right into the development, you can't then get out of the development by going through the exit on University Court. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So I'm a student, I'm staying there, I'm driving up Lumpkin, I turn right into the development, and then do whatever I want to do, and then when I get to leave, I can only turn right
Correct.
out of that. So if I want to go north, where is it intended that I turn around?
I would say the majority of the people are either going to take a right out on Lumpkin and then again right on University Court and circle around, or left on to Cedar and and then swing around that
So
direction.
do we have any understanding of what that might do more broadly to the traffic patterns throughout there?
I think the anticipated traffic patterns in the lower deck parking will be restricted only to residents, where the upper level will allow some parking for people going to the chapel or going to the restaurant. I think that was their intent, was given its location, that the peak hour trip volumes and just the general daily trips should not be as great for students coming and going on a regular basis. But, I mean, you're right, and that was the same concern that I think was exacerbated even worse with the original design, where everything exited from the lower level.
Well, because, I mean, I think I mean, I work on campus and I see this happen all the time. You see a car or an SUV driving around campus, dropping off and picking up students at 3 or 4 different locations. And so I think the notion that just because students live across the street from campus, that they're going to walk everywhere onto campus is probably not too realistic. So I'm just kind of trying to think about what this is on this particular piece of property, obviously, but it has implications for traffic patterns more broadly in that part of our community. And then the other issue that comes to mind is, there are other pieces of property along Lumpkin where they may want to do something like this, and I'm trying to think long-term what all of that additional traffic on Lumpkin may mean, especially if they're all these kind of ride-in, ride-out type things. But,
They're legitimate concerns.
I mean, it has the potential to really, especially at the times between classes, to really jam that up.
Brad, can you share some details that might be happening on that very, very busy sidewalk with that ride-in, ride-out? Is that will that be a raised
In the
pedestrian?
center, yes.
No, the whole thing? Aren't sometimes the walkways raised? So the sidewalk height, they don't go down a curb into the driveway and then back up on the island and back down. It ends up being almost a.
It's like a
what's
speed
the-
table.
What's the word?
Like a speed table?
Yeah,
I would hazard to, I just don't know, given proximity of that sidewalk to the existing grade of Lumpkin Street, I don't know if if you could get up that fast, or if you would drop. I don't know if from an engineering standpoint, I don't know if we could make that work.
that's right.
But I don't think it's designed that way now, too.
It could be more of a safety issue for people trying to navigate up and back down over, what'd you call that again? A
A speed table.
speed
The speed
table.
table would raise the whole thing up, and that's what you've got on Baldwin Street, at the main crossing there from
Yeah.
North Campus down to the stadium, where
Yeah.
everything comes up. But
Yeah.
I don't know, just from a pure design standpoint, that's something I'm sure the architect and their engineers can address.
Okay, I'll get some more details about that.
Okay.
Because it is, we want more pedestrian, the pedestrian traffic is there already. We're hoping that this project would add more pedestrian, but seems like a very congested up, down walking path there for cars, where I think if we can encourage the cars to not be parking where the pedestrians have to go around them while they're waiting to go right in or right out. But I appreciate the improvements that have been made to it, especially setting the building back further and not being it seems like it was right at the sidewalk. And so,
They have
It's a lot of
moved it
work.
back at the request of the university.
yeah, that's a lot of work.
There are no bus stops along that stretch of Lumpkin. If I recall correctly, the closest one would be up above Baxter Street, kind of across from the Miller.
I can update you on that.
Is there
There
a new
is a
one?
bus bends right in this university court is really a circle back there to
Okay,
O
so there's
House
that one, but
and
there's
the
not
dorm.
one.
So they have a bus stop that continues on over
Yeah,
to
down,
the high rises and behind Legion Field. And then they have buses that loop around right at that cafeteria meal plan area that come back out.
But
So they're all tucked right on the University Court because you can't stop on Lumpkin. We need everything moving.
Yeah,
that
I
we
mean,
can.
I know they recently put one in that has a bus bay, kind of just above Baxter. But, I know that the bus routes that go up and down Lumpkin and don't creep back into that University Court area wouldn't really service this area, which I think is the Health Sciences, Milledge Avenue.
Well, there's going to be new bus routes. That's part
Yeah,
of
I'm just
what's
hoping
changing.
that as things grow, because certainly, we'll probably see some more development along this corridor, and it seems like a logical place for student housing. It's directly adjacent to the university. I hope that we'll get some more of those bus bays and an actual bus stop along the stretch. Because I actually ride the health sciences bus on this stretch too, and there are plenty of times where I wished it would stop so I could get out and go somewhere close to there. But yeah, I'm hoping that as this corridor grows, that there will be some more transportation options for the folks who end up living there.
Further discussion, guys? Okay, let's go home.
We're
Thank
done.
you.
7:14.